This tank is one of the best tanks at tier 8 as a medium tank, and it's free. So today we're going to be having a look at it. It is part of the new season pass as well. So hopefully it'll be an interesting one. It is of course the season rank 100 reward for the Bellerophon Centurion Mark 5/1. So yeah, it's an interesting one to say the least. But let's have a look at the statistics, how you should load up the tank if you are thinking about actually using it when you do get to rank 100 from the season, as I'm sure quite a few of you are getting near that at this point. But the Bellerophon Centurion Mark 5/1, it has this really fast firing 230 alpha damage with good penetration for a tier 8 medium. You're not expecting anything outrageous, but you know, 226 on its standard rounds, it's more than enough at tier 8. And of course the premium rounds are 258. It's okay, I mean it's decent. You're going to be able to deal with most tanks that you come up against from the front, but we have ran it with a view range and kind of overall build, since we wanted to make it as kind of fluid and not kind of drive into one statistic of the vehicle to make it like super overpowered or anything like that in one aspect, because this tank is very all-round, so I want to boost up everything about it to make it even better. And of course we've gone with advanced loader, as you pretty much always do on any of your tanks, to be honest with you. Most tanks except from a few I'd use advanced loader on. So that's an extra 10% damage per minute, or reducing your loading time by 10%, so it equates to the same thing. And then we've of course got view range plus 10% using advanced optics, because we want to get as many of the enemies spotted so we can get some assistance damage, and you'll see some assistance damage in the 2 replays we've got coming up as well. And then of course we've gone with improved ventilation, which of course increases basically all of your crew performance by 5%, so that's things like aiming time, it's things like damage per minute, because it reduces your DPM, or increases your DPM and decreases your reload. It will boost your view range, it will increase your track repair speed, so it's all very minor stuff with regards to how much it impacts it, but it is still very powerful and a really good use, especially when you're trying to make the tank all round a really good one, as opposed to, you know, give it, I don't know, 12.5% better aiming time, or increasing your accuracy, because although you can use gun stabilizer on this tank, because it is very accurate in the first place, 0.31, it's not really necessary. And yes, it will increase your accuracy even more, but yeah, once again, not necessary in my eyes, and I'd rather use some of the other equipment that's going to make certain aspects better. And you can see here, damage per minute isn't particularly insane with this vehicle. You got 2,200, so you're not able to have like the kind of middle finger DPM of some of the vehicles at this tier, things like the NM116 or stuff like that, but it's still very good. And of course 10 degrees of gun depression as well, so nice one to have in addition. 50 kilometers an hour top speed, which is good. 20 kilometers an hour backwards, not too bad. The only problem is this tank is pretty big, but in saying that, the armor of this tank is actually very good, and if you can get hold down, this tank becomes really godly, and that's what you have to use about this tank to make it work. As you can see with the appearance, you've got this big shielded plate on the front of the turret, much like you'd have with a Conqueror or a Super Conqueror, or the VZ55 with kind of that turret spaced armor. So it's got the same sort of thing, but obviously this has like the I don't know, the Spartan helmet, or at least like the gladiator helmet, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, Wargaming added that into it, and so yeah, it's definitely one of the nicer vehicles in terms of the performance of it, and it's basically a better tech tree version than the Centurion 1, which is, yeah, I mean, pretty weak in today's meta. But let's jump into some gameplay. We've talked enough about the tank. Hopefully you've got a good overview of how you can set it up and the different ways to play it, but let's actually see how you play it. So the first matchup that we do have is on Arctic region, and this map is actually one I really enjoy playing. I think it's kind of got a little bit of everything. You have all kinds of different things that you can make work, and different tank classes can use this map really well. So what we're going to do with the Bellerophon is take it into the central location. I feel like when you go into E4 and 5 at the beginning of the game, you can get a good overview as to what's happening within the game, and then you can make your choice as to what you need to do from there. You can always retreat, or you can do whatever you need to try and win the game. And that's exactly what we're going to try and do. And when we come up to this ridge, literally right here, you can often spot the people on the hill. And oh look, we managed to spot the Kanonen Jagdpanzer 105. So that was a nice one. Gets us a little bit of free damage. And then for some reason the spyglass on the enemy team decides he's going to YOLO into the dip. And for some reason people do this way too early in the game. Now YOLOing into the dip, it isn't the best idea. Is it possible to do it at some points? Yeah, but I wouldn't ever really recommend it. And yet again, I have no idea what the AMD here is doing. I definitely wouldn't be sitting in the middle of the open field. We take a massive old hit there for over 400 damage, and I was probably thinking it's got to be like a TD. Maybe the Kanonen hit me, but then I realised it was actually further over. It was like in D or E9, so I'm assuming that there's someone sat there, and so maybe we'll find them as the game goes on and find out whether this TD is actually sat in the back. Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise when we found out what it was. But either way, the Tiger P manages to push up. Not particularly the best idea in this sort of matchup. I would not be pushing up in a Tiger P, especially over there. But they seem to be trying to heavily push the J and K line, and yeah, it's not going too well for them since you can really easily defend from the base. But if they actually push down into the dip in K5 and 6, it's actually really good. And you can avoid being hit from everyone, and therefore you can farm up anyone that's sat up on the hill. But yeah, we managed to get into this position here. And now you're seeing the armor actually working. And for some reason, there's a top tier heavy playing up in a sniping position where it doesn't have any gun depression in the VK1001P. I have no idea what he's doing, but apparently that's... I have no idea, but either way, we're going to try and farm him down. And oh look, it's an IS-3 that is the one that actually hit us in the back, because, you know, top tier heavies just literally sat out in the open in the middle of a field, remaining undetected, and yeah, hoping that they're not going to get farmed. Now you can see here he's just still there. I have no idea what he was thinking, but he manages to pen us, which I was a little bit triggered about since we just turned the turret. And if you do turn the turret in this thing, people can pen you, because at the end of the day it is just a Centurion turret, so it's quite easy to pen. But I was still annoyed that, you know, he manages to hit that over the ridgeline. But that is what it is. I should have remained with the turret looking straight at him as we pulled back down that ridge. But yeah, it is what it is. Either way, we've managed to pick up 1900 actual damage with 1800 assistance, so a decent game so far. And you know, this isn't particularly the easiest tank to get a ton of damage in, because you've seen that there is, you know, the damage per minute limitation with this. You know, you don't have that crazy high damage per minute that's going to be kind of that middle finger like we said at the beginning. But either way, we've still picked up, what, like 3,700 combined, which is more than enough at tier 8 to have a good game. You'd be pretty happy with a game like this, or at least I would, and maybe not if you were going for 3 marks or something like that, but you wouldn't be going down with this sort of kind of damage result if you're going for 3 marks. And we try and go for the side of the VK1001P turret, but because it's APCR and because we're quite far away, and yeah, it loses its penetration values over time, which is something that you might actually not realise with AP rounds and APCR rounds, especially, is that, yeah, they have like a damage or a penetration drop off over time, as you can probably expect if you were right next to a guy throwing a baseball. It would be far more annoying to be 2 meters away than if you were like 100 meters away, because it's just going to slap you 100 meters as opposed to smashing you in the face. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird analogy, but hopefully I gave you the idea of penetration. Whereas the heat rounds, they kind of stay with a decent amount of velocity over time, so they like maintain it, and they are able to pen over time. But unfortunately, you're seeing here they're lacking in APCR rounds, but they are very fast, and that's kind of the benefit of having them. So they're good against lightly armored vehicles, and being able to track components and stuff like that at long ranges, because you don't have to provide such a long lead. But unfortunately in this game we've come to like a little bit of a stalemate. I can't really push the guys on the left since the Progetto 54 needs to be removed. And in order to get the Progetto 54, I've got to be YOLOing into the IS-3. But luckily our fatherland just decides to go. It's actually probably one of the best plays that he can do, because if he does that then it's perfect. I'm trying to avoid the Progetto sniping at the fatherland from behind, because we don't want him getting a crossfire on him. So instead I try and actually just push towards this the last remaining Progetto, and then try and finish off this IS-3, but somehow managing to farm up our fatherland, which is kind of annoying. But either way, now it's time to go after this Progetto, and we're going to YOLO him down into the dip. But the key thing that I feel like with these sorts of tanks is that you have to remain quite aggressive if you want to have like the very good games, because if you don't, you end up with this situation where, yeah, you might be like pretty solid medium tank, but if you leave it too late in the game, you're not able to deal enough damage in a short enough period of time to really come away with the result. And unfortunately we don't even manage to get the ram off in the Progetto, which is a little bit disappointing. But either way, we find the little SU-130PM, and if you were in most medium tanks you'd have probably taken a hit right there and you'd be on a much lower amount of hit points. But because we are playing with the heat shield, or the armoured shield that the Bellerophon has, you actually bounce a ton of rounds, and as you've been seeing, we've bounced 2,800 hit points in this medium tank. A lot of tier 8 heavy tanks don't even bounce that. I mean, look at things like the Tiger 2, you can pen that thing in the turret, whereas this thing, nah, not possible. Or at least not easy to pen. You can pen it through the cupola, but it is once again very difficult to do reliably. But we still picked up, what, 3,000 damage, 2,170 assistance, and this is a sort of game where if you are going for 3 marks, or you're trying to go for your marks of excellence, this is the one that you want to get, because it's going to boost you up. You're probably going to get about, if you're at 95%, you'd probably go up by, you know, 0.5% or something like that, I would expect from a result like this. And of course, if you're lower than that, if you're going for your second mark, you'd probably go up like 1.5%, something like that. So yeah, it would be a good one for going for that. But of course, that is the end of this game. But let's see how much damage or how much XP we got. So 1744 base XP, which is okay. Obviously people playing this tank quite well because it does have that armor. We blocked 3000 damage, and of course it wasn't even a mastery badge, so people obviously finding this tank very, very good. And so yeah, I mean, that's why the expectation for those mastery badges is super high compared to some of the other tanks. But let's jump into the next replay and see whether or not it can continue. So we've seen the Bellerophon in a top tier matchup, but what about when it is middle tier, or at least in a tier 9 game where everything isn't favourable? Does the armour still work? Are you able to deal damage? And does the penetration values on those premium rounds let you down? And I guess that this result is going to show you a bit more of a damage game as opposed to having the combined damage. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one for you guys to stick around and see. And of course, I'd be very interested to see what you think of this tank. Have you actually got it? Do you think it's better than things like the Centurion 1 and some of the other variants of the Centurion, the Centurion 5/1 RAAC, the other tier 8 premium Centurion? Yeah, let me know what you think of this tank. But first off, we managed to find a Batchat 12T who's YOLOing. Not quite sure what he's aiming to do here. But yeah, I always see that these light tanks YOLO down on that side, and it genuinely is such a bad idea. Like, you lose so much of your hit points and you end up just getting removed from the game super, super quickly. As you can see, like, the Batchat is now on literally no health. And yeah, especially if you've got someone that can actually hit their shells, YOLOing across here, not particularly the greatest idea. And so far, we've picked up 1,100 hit points because of those two light tanks that are just YOLOing. And yeah, the shell velocity on these premium rounds, or on these APCR rounds, making it very easy for us to do that. And you can see, having picked up 1,300 damage and missed very few rounds, other than like that one maybe that was kind of speculative anyway. I knew I was probably not going to be able to hit him. But trying to go for the M103, unlikely that we're going to be able to hit him from here, but we go for it anyway, and that's really, sometimes you just have to do it, because, you know, if you don't go for it, you're probably not going to get it, and if you do, it's always a bonus if it does work. And you can see here the Brass not learning from the fact of the other two tier 8 light tanks and tier 9 light tanks that have gone, decides that he's also going to try and YOLO. I don't even know, but for some reason that's what the Brass decides to do, and he loses all of the remaining of his hit points as he does it. So they're all basically a one shot at this point, but we've managed to pick up 1800 damage, so I'm pretty happy with how it's gone. Just now trying to farm up this T10, who for some reason is sticking up in the top area. We managed to hit our friendly Astron Wretch, which is annoying, but you know, you just got to deal with it. And then we just continue our little farm on this tier 9 heavy tank. Realistically, if you were the T10, you'd want to actually go back down to hide away from the area that he was, so he would have wanted to go behind the sand dune so that we wouldn't have been able to hit him, but he just keeps staying there, and we're just rinsing him of the remaining of his hit points. And that's really what this tank does. It's very, very good on a ridgeline. It's very, very good at just picking people off because it has those APCR rounds that can just fling into opponents, and they really don't have much of a drop off in terms of speed because of the fact that, you know, you're constantly firing, and the opponents can be really far away and you're able to hit them within a snapshot, as opposed to some of the AP rounds that you get with a lot of tanks in the game, that you end up, you know, not being able to hit them very quickly, and therefore you're missing shells because you're having to lead a lot further. But this tank doesn't really have that problem, because both the AP and the APCR are essentially super fast rounds, the shell velocity on both of them being very, very good. And that's why you're able to use either one. And you'll actually note that we've not really used any premium rounds within this game. Like, granted, you know, we haven't really faced any of those super heavy tanks or anything like that that are up close and personal with us, but we've not really needed to. And if you're opportunistic and you're fighting against tier 8 mediums, tier 9 mediums, you don't really need them. And you can see here, trying to find that shell on the Batchat who YOLO'd at the beginning, but not quite able to. So instead, it's time to push towards the last remaining opponents, who all seem to be camping on the hill. We go for the really lucky shot there to hit on the Draugen, and yeah, and another one. I feel very, very bad for the Draugen here. He's got the short end of the stick, ended up with the crappy end, and we've managed to hit him again there with a not fully aimed shot. So very lucky in how we're doing. And you can see us just managing to hit the Trinity here, which is nice. The T95 bounces off of us, which is always something nice, is when you've got these high alpha tank destroyers that usually can just pen everything, and they find a bit of space armor on the turret of things like the Bellerophon, and they genuinely just can't pen. Like, it is such an annoying tank to pen if it gets hold down, and that's exactly where we are right now. And that's what makes this tank very, very good. Like, there's few mediums at tier 8 that you'd be able to bounce consistently like 1,000 to 2,000 damage almost every single game. And that's really what you want from these sorts of tanks. And you can see here the T95 once again rearing its ugly head and bouncing again. And so, yeah, I can assume he's getting a little bit miffed, a little bit triggered at the fact that we've been able to do it. But either way, just keeping on unloading. We've ran out of standard rounds, so we're actually having to fire premium, which isn't the worst thing in the world, since we have got the T95, which we need to pen at some point. But yeah, just sticking very healthily and just staying, waiting to see what the opponents are doing, and then making a move as we need to. One thing that I always like to do if I find myself in this situation where we've won this side of the map is, of course, having your team get into the cap circle and then providing cover from here, which is a good way. I don't like capping, like, I'm not saying you should be capping all of the time, but it forces the opponents to then come down and get out of their little kind of ridge lines and stuff like that, where you can farm them up and then you can win the game. But yeah, pushing onto the people on the ridge lines, not a good idea, wouldn't recommend it. So yeah, just sticking back, waiting and making and forcing the opponents to make the mistakes is what you want to do. And we bounce another T95 shell there. As you can expect, I'm getting a little bit cocky with how many rounds we're bouncing in this thing and the armor reliability, and it really is reliable, like genuinely one of the best tanks for being able to reliably bounce things. That's perfect. I'm saying we should attack now. We have definitely got the advantage. There is no need for us to actually cap, since we are more than capable of taking out the rest of them. But you know, there's always one who likes to sit and waste their life in the cap circles, thinking that, you know, it's somehow gonna win them the game. But yeah, a little bit triggered, and you can almost guarantee that, you know, they probably weren't the person at the top of the leaderboard. But either way, 4,300 damage, not too bad. Obviously I was actually triggered with that because yeah, I mean, I actually went down and checked them. So 2,600 block though, and a good game. I was just hoping to get a little bit more out of that game up against those last remaining tanks. But hey ho, you can't win them all, and I can't really blame him if he was just trying to get the win. But there you go, the Bellerophon Centurion Mark 5/1. A really, really good one, and surprisingly so. I didn't think it would be as good as it really is. But thanks very much for watching. If you want to check out some of the other gameplay and tank reviews, including new season tanks like the ones that we've done before for this season, and of course the tier 10 released the Centauro 45T, then I'll link the gameplay and tank reviews playlist, and you can go back a few videos on the channel as well if you want to find it there and see what you fancy watching next if you're interested. But thank you very much once again for watching the video, and I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully. Goodbye.